Hello everyone, my name is Vanessa Hayes. Welcome to my studio. We just went through a series of 4 sky paintings. Today we will be completing the 4 paintings by adding something under each of the skies. The first painting was a morning sky. One of my favorite things to paint is a seascape, so let's finish this painting with the ocean at sunrise. I'm starting out by marking off a level horizon line. Because our sky is our main focus, I'm drawing the horizon line about 3/4 of the way down. With my 3/4 inch flat brush, I'm painting cobalt teal at the horizon line. The flat brush makes painting a straight line easier. And I'm leaving a white space for the wave. And I'm also leaving a lot of white space for sea foam. And I'm smoothing out the horizon line with my number 3 round brush. Next, I'm adding phthalo blue green shade to darken up the horizon where the water is deeper. I'm using the number 8 Chisel blender so I have more control. Paint is still wet, so it will soften into the cobalt teal. I'm also adding the phthalo under the white wave for some shadow. I'm dragging some of the cobalt teal from above the wave into the white in an arching motion. This will give movement to the wave. This will also help soften the hard line at the top of the wave. With the 3/4 inch flat brush, I'm painting the sand with buff titanium. And I'm leaving white space at the water line for the sea foam. And I've changed to the smaller brush. I'm adding a light value of cobalt teal at the water line towards the sand, still leaving white space for the sea foam. And we have completed our ocean at sunrise. So let's move on to our next painting. The second sky practice was a bright blue sky with fluffy clouds. We will keep this a very simple landscape with flowers in the foreground. We will start this painting by masking off some flowers using Pebeo drawing gum and a ruling pen. You may also use an old paintbrush, but put some soap on the brush to prevent the masking fluid from drying on your brush and ruining it. By using the masking fluid, this will allow us to get vivid colors for our flowers. We will apply masking fluid in the foreground for the flowers, and then we will let it dry completely. It must dry completely naturally without heat, or the masking fluid will stick to the paper. I like this brand because it's blue and it makes it easier to see where you're applying it. I'm making smaller dots for flowers in the distance, and then I'm making larger flowers in the foreground. Now we must let it dry. Make sure to clean your ruling pen or brush immediately before the masking fluid dries. Now that the masking fluid has completely dried, I'm wetting the area with my 3/4 inch flat brush. And I'm painting green gold as my first wash. While it's still wet, I'm dropping in sap green. And I'm varying the intensity of the sap green. And again, we have to let it dry naturally because of the masking fluid. I'm gently applying water across the grass area, and I'm being careful not to lift the paint. Then, with the number 3 round brush and a thick, rich sap green, I'm making grass strokes at the bottom in the foreground. I wet the paper first to let these strokes diffuse so we have an indication of grass. At this point, we are just starting to add some texture. And now we need to let it dry. Now I'm using my #1 rigger in Perylene Green to paint more defined strokes for the details in the foreground. Now that it has completely dried, I'm using a rubber eraser to remove the masking fluid. You may also use your fingers, but I love this rubber eraser. Be very careful so you don't tear the paper. Because the masking fluid preserved the white paper, the flowers will be more vibrant. For the flowers, I'm painting a light value of Rose Madder Permanent in every white spot. Don't worry if there's white showing, it will highlight the flowers. I'm going back with a darker value of Rose Madder and touching at the bottom of the flowers. Next, I'm adding some Hansa Yellow Medium at the top of the flowers. And once again, we let it dry. Now we're adding our final details. I'm adding some stems onto the flowers. And a little more detail to the large flowers. And now we have completed our second painting. a field of flowers on a sunny day. For our third painting, the colors have inspired me to paint a desert scene using the same colors we used in the sky. I'm using a 3/8 inch angular shader and yellow ochre as my base color. I'm using a dry brush for texture in the foreground. Then I'm adding a little more water in the background for a smoother wash. Then I'm adding nickel azo yellow, which is a beautiful bright golden yellow. Next, I'm using burnt sienna to paint jagged desert mountains in the distance. I'm intensifying the value of the burnt sienna because I don't want them to fade into the background. I'm using a rich consistency of burnt umber to paint the left side of the mountains to add some shadows. Moving to the foreground, I'm adding burnt sienna for texture. And I'm adding less color and detail as I move towards the middle ground. And now we let it dry. And to finish up, I'm using the #1 rigger to paint grasses in the foreground with Payne's Gray. And we have completed our stormy desert. I decided to finish the final sky practice with another seascape. One of the most beautiful things you could ever see is a sunset on the beach. I'm using my 3/4 inch flat brush and painting a light value of indigo. And I'm leaving white spaces for waves. I'm dragging indigo to the waterline where the waves would hit the sand, and I'm leaving white for sea foam. Next, I'm adding Prussian blue while the paint is still wet. I'm adding a light wash of Quin Gold in the waves and at the water's edge to pick up some of the colors from the sky. And I'm also adding some rose madder, also picking up colors from the sky. Now I'm adding moon glow under the waves for more definition to the waves and texture in the sea foam. And I'm adding some shadow under the water right at the edge where the sand and the water meet. I'm painting the sand with buff titanium all the way to the waterline. Then I'm adding moon glow to darken the wet sand. I'm filling in a little more color in the water at the edge with indigo. I'm adding more indigo at the horizon line to darken the water. And we have completed our sunset on the beach painting. Let's carefully remove the tape to reveal nice clean borders. The tape has been on the paper for a few days, so I'm going to use the heat gun to loosen the tape. Sorry, this process looks a bit clumsy, but it is very satisfying. After removing the tape, I felt like the sunset painting needed more color in the water to reflect the colors in the sky. So I'm adding just a little bit more of the Quin Gold. And I think that looks much better. So here we have our 4 completed paintings. Let me know in the comments which sky or finish painting was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, Please give a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.